Welcome to the Science and Spirituality Podcast, where we dive deep into universal spiritual principles and ground them in modern science. My name is Chris Carden.
And my name is Kevin Carden. And we are committed to simplifying the spiritual side of success for you with easy to understand scientific research so you could walk away with practical tools to create radical transformations in your life. Let's get started.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Science and Spirituality Podcast. This is Chris. I'm here with Kevin, as usual. And today the last 6 episodes, we really got into the mental faculties and talking a lot about our spirituality and how we can use those faculties to navigate between the physical side of our nature and the spiritual side of our nature. In this podcast, we really want to dive deep into like practical tools about how you can actually start to implement these certain things and really start to see differences in your life. And so what we wanted to touch on today is the power of the compound effect. And what the compound effect basically is or means is small daily things that you do on a consistent basis or don't do on a consistent basis end up making the difference in your life. So we're going to dive into that today.
Mm-hmm. And I just, as you were sharing that, a simple example to really get the magnitude of this is if you take a plane and fly from Los Angeles and your target is New York in the United States, and the plane makes a 1 degree shift northward and keeps on that 1 degree shift and doesn't course correct, that 1 degree shift, if it's made in the very beginning of the trip, will cause you to end up in Canada. Hundreds of miles away from just a 1 degree shift, which may seem very, very, very tiny at the very beginning, but carried out over time, over thousands of miles, it will shift you in a very big direction. So that's kind of the power of what we're talking about. And we have a lot of examples.
Yeah.
Not just, this is very practical as Chris said. So hear this and start to think into your life is what small thing can you do or what small thing can you stop doing that will actually help you move in the direction of your dream more and more over time.
Yeah. And I think the thing to highlight from your story is that if you were, and I'm not a pilot, but if I was going to imagine myself to be a pilot, a 1 degree shift, I'm like, you're not even going to feel the plane move.
Not
at all. But then over time, that small shift makes humongous differences.
Yep.
And so everyone listening, when we're thinking about changing our life and making radical shifts in our results, whether that's our fitness results, our money results, what we want to do with our lives, I feel like we all have this notion that there has to be some huge thing that we have to do or some major shift where it's like 1 week, like I'm going to kill it. And then all of a sudden I'm going to be this success.
Yeah.
But really it's the little things that we do on a daily basis, day in and day out, that are really going to get us there. And the key with these things, and if you think hard, you don't have to think that hard. You can think of maybe 5 or 10 things that you could be doing on a daily basis to move you forward. And if you make a list of those things, I guarantee you they're easy to do, but they're also easy not to do. And that's the pitfall that most people get into. It's like, I can do 10 minutes of yoga a day. That's easy, but it's also easy not to do that. Like I can snooze the alarm for an extra 15 minutes and not do that. And you do that for like 2 or 3 days and you don't feel a difference. But then you do that for 3 months. If you're doing 15 minutes of yoga for 3 months, you're going to start to feel it. And the same thing is if you don't do it. So the example that I wanted to give, Kev, and just to kind of put some numbers to it, and we were talking about this before the podcast, is you take 2 people, they both weigh the same amount. One person decides to drink water every day, and the other person decides to drink 1 Pepsi or 1 Coke a day.
Coke.
Now, Coke, whatever.
Coke is better.
Yeah.
My
Coke.
opinion.
Yeah. Honestly, though, like I think I can actually tell the difference. Pepsi's kind of like sweeter, and Coke has more of that like bubbly taste. I don't know if you can
better.
concur with that. Yeah, whatever. I don't know if I agree with that. Anyway, Coke or Pepsi people, DM us. Let's have a discussion.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, going back to the example, drinking 1 Coke a day, it's 150 calories a day. You do that for like 2 or 3 days. It doesn't seem like a big deal at all. It's like, oh, it's just a Coke. But if you drink 1 Coke a day for a year, you'll gain 15 extra pounds. And the way that I did that math was 150 calories of Coke times 365 divided by 3,500 calories, because 3,500 calories equals 1 pound gained. and you'll gain 15 and a half pounds over the year. So it's like, if you take those two people, those two examples, one guy was like, I'm going to drink water. The other guy was, I'm going to have one Coke a day. After the first day, or after the second day, or after the first month, you're really not going to be able to see a difference at all because it's only a few calories. But added up over the year, one person gains 15 pounds. The other person doesn't gain any weight. So that's like the power of the compound effect. And you can see examples of this in all over. And I think what's happened in our society, especially with like Instagram and especially with like, mostly like Instagram and social media, it seems like people are overnight successes.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden this guy comes out of nowhere and he's got all this like fame, maybe all these followers, like has this successful course, and you're like, wow, like, damn, like I need to make a course right now and like do this in like 2 months. But like, you don't see the behind the scenes, like what that person, that guy or gal did on a consistent basis to get to that point.
Mm-hmm. And it just actually makes me think of our podcast. I was thinking about this as we were talking and as we began, is that we've been doing this now, like at the recording of this episode, it's been, I think, a year.
Almost a year, right? Or maybe a year.
Something like that. And before that, we actually tried to start a podcast and we had maybe like 7 to 8 episodes, and then that we fell off of it. So like that desire was there, of course, but it wasn't until we actually just committed and were consistent with it every week. And there was times in the very beginning, I remember it was like we had maybe like 3-4 weeks off and we didn't produce an episode, and the momentum was lost. But as we've been doing this now week after week after week, it's become easier, and the numbers of people listening, so thank you for sharing, thank you for listening, it has increased exponentially. But that doesn't happen in the first month or even the first 6 months. It happens over time. So it's the compound effect, and we're just seeing those results right now.
Yeah. And
just a piece to come back to,
go ahead.
Into it, is like, we got to talk about discipline as well. Well, let's come back to that. But what were you going to say?
Yeah. Well, no, I was going to say that another just quick example that maybe will illustrate this again is like, if you like flick a rock down a hill, like in the very beginning, you can probably stop the rock, like in maybe the first 10 feet. But after it starts to get some momentum, it starts to roll faster and faster and faster. And then there's no way you're stopping it. And it's very similar with these small little tasks that you do. In the very beginning, it's going to take some discipline and some commitment to stick with it. But then there's going to be a point, whether it's a few weeks down the line or a few months down the line, where you're going to like catch that momentum and you're just going to feel weird when you don't do it. Like I got that way during quarantine with yoga. Like I've always wanted to get into yoga and I've never been super consistent with it. Like I'll be like 2 weeks here, take a break, like do a couple days here, take like months off, like whatever, you know what I mean? And so in quarantine, I was like, I'm going to do this. And now like every morning when I wake up, cause it's been like 3 or 4 months now of doing consistent yoga or some type of exercise in the morning, I wake up and I'm like, all right, like, what am I doing? Like which exercise am I doing today? Like, am I stretching? Am I doing abs? Like, it's so ingrained now because I put in that work and that discipline in the very beginning, and it sucked in the beginning. So I was like, I kind of want to sleep, you know, but then you reach that point, almost like that point of no return, where this invisible force kicks in. And that force to me is that momentum where it's like, I'm on a roll now. Like I'm that rock down the hill and I'm not stopping.
Yeah. That we've mentioned this on another episode. I forget which one, but it's a term by Napoleon Hill, who is the author of Think and Grow Rich. That's what he's most known for. But in a book called The Keys to Success, he talks about what's called cosmic habit force.
Yeah.
And I really think it's more than just, momentum, although that's a word for it you can use. But I really think it's an energy that comes from, that's even beyond our own human system, that's just life itself, like the cosmos, like the galaxy. Like it's just this force, this energy that goes along with things. And that builds up as you stay consistent. But again, like you said, discipline, we have to stick with it in the beginning, because you have to overcome that habit force of being, what's it called? Like inert. It's like no movement. It's a law of
it's physics. Like you need an outside force to act on it in order for it to move. But an object at rest will stay at rest.
Boom. That's what I was talking about. Yeah. What is it? It's a law, but I forget what law is it. It's like law of something, but
I don't know. Some law.
We should know this.
Newton's second law of something.
Whatever. Yeah. We should know this on the Science and Spirituality podcast, but we're talking about something real. So
it's a thing.
Lack of the term, that's what's going on. And so once you start to have that momentum built, then it's like, it's easy. Like you said, it's like not even thinking like, shouldn't I do it? But it's like, I'm doing it. And then if you even fall off a day or two, it's like, it's not a question of getting it back on track because you feel weird, like you said, if you
Yeah.
are off track. And
Yeah. And
go
I was
ahead.
going to say, I think in the very beginning too, I think we're as a society and just some kind of whatever in our psychology, where we want the results. We want to
Mm,
see the results. And so in the very beginning, when you're starting some kind of habit, as I'm thinking working out, and you do it for the very beginning, you're not going to see any results right away. You got to stick with it.
yeah.
So in the very beginning, and this feels good, like when you commit to something and then you do it, there's like this equity that you build in yourself and in your own word, where it's
Mm,
like, when I say something, I'm
I'm
going to
gonna do
do
it.
it. Because if
Yeah.
you say stuff, because dude, this was me throughout my 20s. Like I'm still in my 20s, but like in the early 20s, like, and even sometimes now, where I'll say I'm going to do something and then I don't do it. And maybe like one time it's like, okay, it's not that bad. But if you rack up those like failed commitments to yourself, you start to like get this sense of, I don't even trust myself anymore.
Mm,
Like, I'm not even going to tell myself I'm going to do something because I'm not going to do it. And that starts to
yeah.
like erode and eat away at your self-confidence.
Hmm.
So in the very beginning, like, forget about the results. When you do it, that's the win.
Mm,
Those are the wins in the beginning. And then
yeah.
eventually, again, when that cosmic habit force, that momentum kicks in, then you'll start seeing the results. And then you're unstoppable at that point. Just the
Exactly.
very beginning. Or what's that quote? It's the start that stops most people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
And I just another thing that popped up for me that I really want to nail in, and because this is what I was really trying to speak to with the cosmic habit force and like that
Mm-hmm.
building of momentum. It's even beyond that because in spirit, like in our spirit, we all want to grow. We all want to evolve. We all want to progress and become more than we have been before. We want that evolution. That's literally life itself seeking to pour through us in ever greater, freer, fuller ways. That's spirit's life in us. That's the whole point of spirit. And so when we align ourselves with this compound effect, this habit force, just doing the small things every day and building ourselves up, we align with the truth. We
Mm-hmm.
align with the energy that is within all of us. And it's like we enter into this stream of aliveness that lifts us up even beyond what we can normally do in our human with our human self. Like we go beyond our humanness and access that higher realm, which some people have called a flow state. And it just carries us. It's like we're actually not trying to swim up a river, trying to go against and force things, but we're actually flowing with it now and
Mm-hmm.
going to a destination we actually want to be in. So
Yeah.
it just adds to that. And it's something that can't be really described. Like I'm trying with my words, but it's something that is best experienced.
Yeah, and when you just described that, because that's the first time I've ever heard that.
Mm,
But like when I heard that, I didn't get goosebumps, but I felt like goosebumps were coming almost. Where it's like I felt this thing in my heart. Where, and I think you might have spoken about this recently on like one of your Instagram posts, where it's like the truth doesn't need words.
mm,
So the way that you described it resonated with me enough, where I knew that was what you just said is the truth. I
yep.
felt like an inner knowing.
Yep.
And so if any of you felt that too and that resonated with you, like that's good,
Mm,
because it means like something inside of you understood that and was like, yeah, like that was it. So I
exactly.
mean that was beautifully said.
Thank you.
Um I,
Really quick, practically what you're feeling is like if you take two grand pianos, put them in the same room, you play one chord, a C chord on one of those grand pianos, the other grand piano, the same strings of the C chord are going to start vibrating because it has the same resonance. So every one of us has a tapping into the ultimate truth. And when we
mhm.
hear truth, we resonate with it. We know it. And it's a feeling that we get. It's not something that is logical sometimes, but I like to put that logic to it.
Isn't that wild that
Dope.
the like you play a chord and it'll resonate on the other instrument and it'll just automatically play?
Vibration.
It's wild though, like when you think about it.
Yeah.
I was watching Better Call Saul the other day,
Uh-huh.
and he was in the pool, and he had his phone inside a plastic bag so that the water couldn't get on his phone. So like, and I was like, this is such a weird concept. Like he can touch his phone and everything, he can look at it, and then he can also the sound, like it's just the properties of just
Mm,
like physics are just so
yeah,
cool.
it's
It's
dope.
just like, what the hell? Yeah, because the vibrations move. Like you don't even need to. Oh, whoa. Yeah, you don't. Yeah, it was just weird. I don't know. I just thought of that.
Yeah,
But I wanted
awesome.
to bring it back to the uh, like back to center here about a tip that I want to give out that I've been using, especially over quarantine. about this compound effect and about daily habits, like daily things that you can do on a daily basis to move you towards your goals. What I did in the beginning of quarantine was I wrote out my like top 3 to 5 goals that I wanted to do. And then next to it, I wrote out what's one thing that I can do with 15 minutes or less of my time that'll move me in the direction of this goal that I can do every day.
Mm.
Like I broke it down to like the simplest time frame, the simplest thing that I could do. So for example, like I'm studying acupuncture and Chinese medicine right now, and it's daunting sometimes to think I'm about to graduate and there's, I mean, my school did a great job teaching me, but there's 2,000-3,000 years of knowledge into this medicine. And sometimes I get overwhelmed because I'm like, how am I ever going to know it all? Where do I start? Like, who do I want to help? Like, how do I get this information in my head? And if I sit there and think about that, I'm going to be paralyzed. Like, I don't know what to do. It's just too much. But if I say I'm going to read 15 minutes of a Chinese medicine book every single day, after one day, it's not going to do shit. After 2 days, not going to do shit. But after 3 months or a year or 5 years, that's where you start to see the results.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, what can you do on a daily basis with a little bit amount of your time every day, or at least 5 or 6 times a week, and do it? And then that will start to add up. And Kev, you talked about the God's view before this podcast. So maybe you can speak a little to that next, but it's taking that long-term view, understanding that you're going to be alive for a long time, and there has to be a certain level of patience and consistency with and like determination with what you do to eventually get to where you want to be.
Yeah. I mean, simply
And
put,
that's breaking free of the mold of what we've been taught and what we see in society. And that's key to remember too.
yeah. Yeah. And just really quick, God's view is just what you were saying, is the long view. And I forget where I heard, who said this, because I learned this from Bob Proctor. The example he gave is, if you imagine a bug in a rug, and that bug is looking for a crumb of food that was dropped in that carpet, that bug is sifting through the tufts of wool that are in the carpet and is trying to find his way, and just like it gets hit with the tuft of wool, it's like bang, and that's a problem, that's an obstacle, it's like, oh my gosh, this sucks, and it's moving past that, and again and again and again it keeps happening. When if you take a higher view, like a person's view of that carpet, you don't see problems, you don't see these little tufts of wool, because you have that higher perspective and you actually can see a beautiful pattern. So when you see and take the longer view of your life, you have more space and more ease without having to think like, oh my gosh, like, you know, this is like, I'm only looking at a week of my life, or even just a month of my life. I'm taking a longer view so that you can give yourself space to then really consider, like, who do I want to be? What do I want to work towards? What do I want to do? And then you break it down and bring it back to the day to day. It's like, what could I do to then move in the direction of that life that I want to live, in that grander view of my life?
Yeah. And I mean, I've been in this work for a while with you, and I know you have too. And for me, this idea we're talking about is the key that I was missing for a long time, a long time. And I'm still working on it, but it's like, this feels right. Like when I talk about this and when I do it this way, it feels good. Because then you don't have to put so much pressure on yourself to do it all now.
Yeah.
You just gotta put some pressure on yourself to be consistent with little things on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Another example that I'd like to give, just to kind of bring this home, because I like examples, especially for my own life. Have you ever thought of something that you said you were gonna do like 4 years ago, and then you're like, damn, like if I started that 4 years ago, you know where I'd be today? Like, don't let that be 4 years from now, because you have this like deep down inner knowing that if you started something 5 years ago, you'd be light years ahead of where you are today. But then it's so hard to place that same feeling into the future and not have it happen again. Because again, it's like you're looking at 5 years down the line. You're like, that's so far away. Like, what is this? Like, what is reading this one page going to do today?
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. So final thing I want to touch on here to really bring it in for a landing is what I mentioned is like, we really need to talk about is discipline. Because I really believe that anyone listening to this podcast and is actually interested in hearing about this has had moments in their life where they committed to something. They're like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to work out. I'm going to read. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to visualize, like whatever. And I'm going to do that consistently. But they would fall off track a week or even a month later. And so discipline, the definition of discipline is giving yourself a command and following it long after the feeling in which you said that action you wanted to take that feeling has left you. Long after that
Mhm.
feeling has left you, you stay consistent with it. And for me, like what has really worked to help me develop this discipline is two things. Number one, be firm with the commitment I make and be willing to overcome that resistance that will come up in that initial part of you actually staying consistent. And then number two, be compassionate with yourself. Be compassionate if you do fall off track, because even if it's just a day or two and you fall off track, when you're compassionate with yourself and you don't beat yourself up, it's way easier to get back on track and then stay consistent more often with it. And that builds more and more of the discipline.
Yeah.
Whereas most often, and this has happened with me in the past, is that if I would be consistent with something, I'd say like, I'm going to visualize every day for the next week. I'm going to do it 5 days, and then I miss 1 or 2 days. Then I would beat myself up. And because I beat myself up, I wouldn't do it for the whole next week. And then I would fall off. And then a month later, it'd be like, damn it. If I actually stayed consistent, I'd be so much farther along a month from now,
Yeah.
and it's been a month. Whereas if you didn't beat yourself up and you were compassionate with yourself, knowing that this is just a pattern, then you were on track for 5 days. There was 1 or 2 days you fell off, and then you get back on track and you recommit again for that next week. And then you get 6 days out of 7. And then the next week, you're even more compassionate on that one day you fell off, and then you get 7 days out of 7. And then you continue and you build that up. And that's something that just grows over time. But you have to have those two energies, being firm with yourself to stay consistent, to get back on track, and then to be compassionate when you do fall off track, because it's normal.
Yeah, I think that's so important, especially the the compassionate part when you fall off. Because if you're like this strict hard ass person with yourself and you do fall off and then you beat yourself up like you did, and I have a tendency to do that too.
Yeah.
You have this fear of wanting to start again.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to fall off again and have to beat yourself up again. Like you're afraid of your own judgment of yourself.
Yep.
And that's deep. That hits deep, because after a long time, like again, you start to lose your self-esteem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing, I don't even remember where I heard this, but maybe it's something I just made up, but you can never beat yourself up into a life that you love living.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you're trying to do with these habits, this compound effect, is to build a life that you love living, that you really enjoy, that is life-giving to you. So you can't beat yourself up into it. You have to love yourself into a life you love living, even, and not even when, but especially when you fall off track. Love yourself. Anyway.
Yeah. And love yourself into it. That's like, don't confuse the words there too, because there's tough love too. Like sometimes you have to be tough with yourself.
Yep.
But you know that it's out of the interest of growth. You know that it's out of the interest of love.
Yeah.
Where it's like when you fall off and you beat yourself up, that's like you're looking to criticize. Like that's not from a loving place.
That's not tough love. Yeah.
Exactly.
Not at all. That's tough love. Or I'm sorry, that's criticism and beating yourself up disguised as tough love. You may use those words. Oh, this is just tough love. I'm being firm with myself here. But it's like, no, that's criticism. That's beating yourself up. That's a pattern that has, I believe, started from a very young age for most of us, is that we were just scolded for being wrong. It's time to shift that.
We can do another episode on that, because that's a deep rooted paradigm where it's like you're being hard on yourself because deep down that paradigm is trying to get you to stop trying. Because it wants to keep you comfortable.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, we could definitely do another episode about that. But anything else on the compound effects? I think we got some really strong points.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to put some book resources in the show notes. The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy.
Yep.
And then The Slight Edge. Forgot the author, but I have the book here, so I can put that in the show notes. But those two books, and the Compound Effect is short. You can read that in like a weekend, and it really hits home of showing a bunch of examples of how the little things you do or don't do, that's such a key, or don't do, really make the difference.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's actually one of my like early books that I first started studying in personal development was The Compound Effect. I'm glad that I found it at that point, because now 7 years later, I've been consistent with studying personal development, spirituality, and now here we are. We have a podcast together, and I've run a coaching business. Like, it's insane what can happen over time with the years of just being committed to the little things. So, action step. I really want to ground this. I say this all the time. This is not meant to just to entertain you. This is meant to inspire you to action. So I encourage you to take even just a minute of time and jot down, write it down. Don't just think about it, but ink it, put it down on paper. What are you going to do differently for this? Like, what are you going to commit to? What's one thing just one thing. Don't pick
Mhm.
10. What's one thing that you can implement and stick to? Just start with 7 days, doing it 7 days in a row. What's one thing you can do within 5, 10, 15 minutes that would
Yeah.
improve your life? And
And
commit to
and
that.
also to just to piggyback onto that, just because it's simple doesn't like pick something simple. Like
Yeah.
this doesn't have to be some crazy thing. Like just because
Yeah.
it's like you can pick something simple. It could be
Yeah.
something small. Yeah.
Exactly. I have my clients listen to audios that will inspire them and then give them the information that they need to build their dreams. That's based on over 30 plus years of research. That is the consistency. I tell them to listen to it every day, and it will change your life. So just do something and simple. It could be simple like that. Like I tell my clients to listen to like 10, 15 minutes audio every day. That's it.
Yeah.
So
Get it
awesome.
done.
Get it done. Yeah. We'll talk to you another episode. And that's it for today. So thanks for tuning in. And we really hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed recording it. So any questions, any comments, just connect with us on Instagram. You could always DM us at Kevin Francis Carton.
And at Chris J. Carton. And also, if you feel guided to, the one thing we do ask is for you to please rate the podcast and leave us a review. This way we can reach more people and impact more lives with this amazing information. With that, we'll see you on the next episode.